Burma several times and made his way back for love of the country and the people, and he has some really interesting perspectives to share about world Dharma, global Dharma, and his experiences over there and elsewhere. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. So good evening. Hey, Ken. A few just preliminaries. You can hear me quite acceptably.
A little bit louder.
A little bit louder would be maybe turning that up a little bit. That would be cool. I want to thank you for being here, but I think you already know that. You live here, most of you, right? Others who've come from somewhere other than this incredible community. Where's Jane? Jane, thank you for this vision. Thank you for your good family to come out. Thank you for your courage to bring this together.
Maybe hold it like that.
Okay. I used to be polished and sort of dedicated to perfection. I went to school wanting to be a U.S. president, if you could imagine that. I went to the University of Virginia outside of Washington, D.C. You would have easily voted for me rather than Trump, right? Yes. Not even knowing me. I could even annoy you tonight. You'd still vote for my ass, wouldn't you?
No brainer.
Yeah, no brainer, right? But I went to school where there were 6 U.S. presidents that graduated. It was founded by Thomas Jefferson, a U.S. president, had aspirations not to lead the world, but to engage it. And I have 50 years hence, can't get enough of engagement. So, by way of saying, tonight I want to just simply allow me to, it's like eating a piece of ice cream that you can't lick.
You have to. That's
Yeah,
the way those
yeah. So you still can't hear me in the back? Is that the problem? Hold it close, like drink it like whiskey.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like that?
Like you're kissing
That's
a woman,
almost
Alan.
porno.
Like you're kissing a woman. Yeah, go
That's
for it.
way porno to me.
all right.
Anyway. So here I am. There you go. Thank you very much for that. By way of saying, I've become very extemporaneous, and I purposely have tried, in the spirit of Van Morrison, I'm a fan of his music, the inarticulate speech of the heart. I am just tired of holding up an image. And I don't know whether that relates to you or where you want to go with that. And I've had my journey with images. I am a professional mask maker, really good at hiding actually who I am. I'm sure there's good company in this room. Whether or not you acknowledge that you're a fraud, I'm not sure. But I have had a long history with deception, duplicity. I dare use the hypocrisy word, double life, quadruple lives, quintessential lives that are in denial of the pleasure of life. And I was a super successful Buddhist meditation teacher when I was the best liar on the planet. And I learned that fine art of splintering off from integrity. Not that I judge myself, I've overcome what I feel to be some deep sense of shame through a variety of methods, very unorthodox. And so in one way, most of what I have to say is through the filter of a recovering Buddhist. I do not recommend your children to become Buddhists. Or you. And if I could help you disavow yourself from that ism, I don't care how sacred it is to you. And I'll jump right into the core of it. You know, Caroline mentioned post-monastic life, of all things being dedicated to the study of consciousness. I went into areas of extreme conflict. Burma, many of you know by the name Myanmar, fair enough. I happened to do a book with the Nobel laureate, Aung San Suu Kyi, who's been universally vilified. I'd be happy to talk to you about that privately, to disavow you of that delusion. It's misinformation, it's misogyny.
Fake news.
Fake news. But by way of saying, I went from a monastic life into revolution. Living in Burma, I was a son or child of that spiritual family. It was all that I knew. I hated America, hated it. The Vietnam era, going to college, I'd done my fair share of entheogens. They worked. I wanted an organic experience of transcendence. I went to a Buddhist monastery. I did not know that Myanmar or Burma was governed by a totalitarian, vicious set of dictators. Now, mind you, we only kind of assume that dictatorship is something that happened during World War II or in Cambodia or presently taking root in America. But I had no idea of what it meant to live under a totalitarian psychology. Now, jump time. Many of us know the Professor Noam Chomsky, and he's notoriously genius at understanding, deconstructing his own term, mind control in democratic societies, manufacturing consent, how we get people to like, swipe, and hashtag, and joyously get down on their dopamine effect with this little dopamine pump called an iPad or whatever phone that you have, and you find yourself unknowingly, joyously addicted to behaviors that are contrary to your well-being, your family, and your certain, well, probably often your job. Now, in Burma, I had no idea of the power and the influence of dictatorial rule. What happened after 5-6 years of living monastically, I dare ask, as we're about a quarter of the way into this, because I really want to talk with you and ask questions, how many of you practice meditation? I'll cure you of that problem tonight. Most people, and I don't say it's you, and I say it somewhat satirically, and I've been in a monastery where the mindfulness meditation movement originated. 1947, it can be traced. Rangoon, Burma, by the Prime Minister U Nu. I was given his room as a young monk because he was under house arrest. He brought a young monk from the north of Burma called Mahasi Sayadaw. He was the most learned mindfulness meditation teacher in all of South Asia. And he, along with U Nu and a group of lay people, brought these very remarkable transformational teachings from monastic life and deep forest monastic life into secular society. The monastery where I lived was primarily lived in with women, lay women. There were hardly any monks. We had maybe 20 monks in our monastery, maybe 30 nuns, and sometimes close to 5,000 lay women, because they were the ones most keen on understanding consciousness and were the least indoctrinated in Buddhism. So meditation and theory in Buddhism are often very antithetical to each other. It's very easy to be indoctrinated unknowingly in things that are contrary to the practices that one uses, and I'm a perfect example of that. I lived in a monastery for the better part of 5 years as a monk, and then was thrown out 4 separate times by the dictator because I knew Burmese. I had lived with many of the elite former government officials who had been imprisoned, and my best friend in the monastery was the actual son of the dictator, metaphorically, who was the general of the army, who was disposed of by his father, put into prison, and when he was released, was given a room next to mine in the monastery, and I had a dual education. As I was learning mindfulness meditation, Alan observing his thoughts, his mind, his sexuality, his repression of sexuality, his very deep, ongoing, deep pathological repression of sexuality. I do not encourage celibacy when you're under 35 years old. It does not work. It's traumatic, and it grows in trauma as you get older. I would.
75.
What's that?
At least 75, not 35. Yeah,
That's right. Thank you, Jane. But I'm still recovering from those early years of monastic celibacy and no conversation sexually, no masturbation, unthinkable repression, and I loved it. I don't know why, but it saved me a lot of heartache. Jumping time. My best friend was the dictator's son. He was actually the general of the army. He was a natural-born killer. He killed so many people in World War II. He repressed so many people during his governance as general, repressing his own people, no less. And here he was, given a room next to mine in the monastery. We were pledged to silence in meditation. I was one of the first people he spoke to in 6 years of solitary. And what he gave me was the teachings of totalitarian psychology. And here I was practicing Alan, being mindful of his mind, of his thoughts, of his ideas, going back to in-breath, out-breath. I gave up a 6-year scholarship to study law, hopefully at the very least to be an ambassador, to be a fucking breath watcher. In-breath, out-breath. It's okay for 5 minutes a week. Do not make a career of it. Get over that. And if you think that you really love meditation, come to the retreat that I'm going to be leading down the road here sometime soon, called an hour and a half of it, post-theatrical show at Paradiso on Sunday, the workshop, which is free for those who buy tickets in advance to my theater piece called Spiritually Incorrect, that you can get meditation in an hour and a half and you no longer have to practice it. It's a way of living. It is not a practice. You don't practice making love. You don't practice the end of life. My mother and father and my 3 best friends all died last year. You don't practice dying. It's a cliche. You practice presence. You don't need to practice in isolation with your eyes closed to defraud yourself of pretense. You need to do it in the company of intimate people who are honest and direct with you. And so the whole reversal process, post-monastic life, through my gentleman, the general, and his best friend of all people, Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, the Nobel Peace Laureate. They started a political party together called the National League for Democracy. He went from natural-born killer to non-violent Gandhian activist. A remarkable transformation. How did he do it? By looking at the person right in front of you and being so intimately, radically responsible for being in a state of presence, of love, of compassion, what they called empathy in action, hope in action, which the young Swede today is often using in her hope to mobilize students around the world to possibly interrupt the homicidal economy that we're all embedded. Extinction Rebellion is going viral April 15th. All cities worldwide, a full-on act of civil disobedience to clog the arteries of every major city to alert the elite that the future of life is not only in jeopardy, it's likely to be lost to the next great extinction. So today's getting peaceful for your own personal happiness, your own well-being, is so anathema to the reality that even the kids today are aware of. But going back to Burma and my own training, when I met Aung San Suu Kyi post-monastic life, after she was released from 6 years of house arrest, she's one of us, by the way. She's a remarkable human being. And more remarkable than her are the people of Burma. They so care about the quality of life. They so care about giving to you. They so care about transcending their own sense of self-identity and their own worth, their own belongings. It's an amazing event to be near revolutionaries who care about you more than they care about their own interest. It's so fucking radical. When I met her halfway through, the whole world wanted to meet her. And I was introduced to her by my friend U Tinu, the former general, who started the political party with her. And I said, Daw Suu, I have but one question to start this dialogue with in our book of conversations. I said, you've been known worldwide under house arrest to be a feminist-based, nonviolent activist using the power of love, compassion, and empathy that you call a revolution of the spirit. May I ask, if we never spoke again, what do you mean by that? She said, indeed, let's go right to the center of the issue. You were out on the street, she said. 1,000 people had gathered. All of them. Imagine this. Now put ourselves in the mind and body of revolutionaries. However you identify yourself to be, in your life, your worth, and what really matters to you, your values, your principle. When's that breaking point that you refuse to cower to any collusion to domination? You're willing to stand up in solidarity. It's your child that's being taken away. No, sir, you cannot do that. You are going to stand up. Fair enough? A revolutionary, a rebellion that's happening globally today with the kids. Where are we adults? She said, Ellen, you were out on the street. 1,000 people were there. Every one of them risked losing their home to stand in solidarity, to breathe and be in dignity, to confront the apparatus of totalitarianism and dictatorship and their own internal fear. I went, holy Hannah. Imagine tonight, which I know is sort of far-fetched, but it's not. I've lived during the war for the final year in Yugoslavia. We're good people, educated people, wealthy people, blue-eyed, blonde, yoga teacher training, psychotherapists, philosophers, mindfulness students, politicians, massage therapists, Reiki masters, soccer teachers, single moms, prostitutes, soldiers, all turned towards violence based upon unbroken fusion with ideologies to protect their culture, their religion, and committed war and genocide to people that were actually family members, all within a month. And I began to see in this circumstance, holy hell. If they could do it, I could do it. I needed a deeper intelligence to confront the deeper residual emotionals of my own unrecognized fear, my own greed and anger. Daw Aung San Suu Kyi said, Alan, these people are risking everything. They risk their jobs. They risk their safety. They could go to prison. They likely will. They likely will. And let me tell you, to answer your question, we don't believe in overcoming fear. It was like, oh, you don't? No, we believe in coexisting with fear, which was new to me at that time. This is 1995. Coexisting with fear and learning how to stand in solidarity to that 1% of fearlessness as it co-occupies fear, and learning to act despite it. And standing in solidarity to your values. Every one of them there, we talk about the phrase, learning to quiver in fear and refuse to vilify the people who might imprison you. A very remarkable state of consciousness to live in non-demonization. Now, how many of you have criticized Mr. Trump in the last 24 minutes? 24 hours, how much as an American, I don't know if there's other Americans in the room, how many times I've been to dinner here in the last 30 days where Trump takes a beating. Not enough of a beating. But to show as an example a different way of life is a radical thing. And Daw Suu concluded with me, Alan, the essence of our revolution is this. Individuals having the courage to care for things larger than their own self-interest. And doing it one person at a time. It's called post-meditation. When people ask about mindfulness and meditation and silence and happiness, it's so 2 days ago. There's a far more appropriate form of engaged intimacy and this deep sense of embodying otherness as transformational to self. How many of you know the South African term, Ubuntu? Remarkable, isn't it? In the Buddhist terminology, they have the word bodhisattva coupled with parami, Ubuntu. Ubuntu is the state of consciousness, an emotion in the heart that allows me to look at this woman and resonate with her own interior being as best as I could imagine it, as if it were mine. And what elevated her, I would feel with Ubuntu, it would elevate me. It's called intersubjective intimacy, where individuals empathize with others. Oh, I'm curious about this lady. Who are you? Where are you? What do you feel? Dedicating ourselves to overcome individual meditation practices, which is cool. I do yoga every day. I meditate every day. But mostly what I'm concerned with is meeting people in a state of openness and transcendence of my limited beliefs and fears, my preoccupation with judgment, and to do something that's never been done before, Ubuntu-fy the space. Now let me conclude in the last third of this talk, and we'll open it up to questions. When I left the monastic life, it was terribly traumatic for me, very, very difficult. And I traveled to areas of extreme conflict to do what I could, in my own humble way, to give voice to those people who did not have a voice. The cliche as it may be, give voice to the voiceless. I went to the jungles of Burma back in 1989, and my first book, among the 6 that I've written or co-authored, was called Burma, the Next Killing Fields, based on the Cambodian genocide. I reported on ethnic cleansing of the Karen Christians by the Burmese Buddhist army. It was largely overlooked by international media, unlike today where the Rohingya Muslims are front and center worldwide. But in Burma, the Buddhists went after the Buddhists first, secondly the Christians, thirdly the Catholics, and fourthly now they're going after the Muslims. They're a sociopathic military machinery. But during that time, I learned things that I'd never learned before in my life. What it meant to be in the company of revolutionaries willing to risk everything. And one simple story that has always stayed with me. I met a woman around a fire at night when there were lots of guns and rockets and all kinds of things. I don't like to wear my tattoos and scars publicly, but it was a very, very complicated circumstance. And this woman and I became very fond of one another. And I asked her around this campfire, I said, have you ever been in love? And she looked at me with this deep, open-hearted stare, and she said, indeed, I have been in love, and in fact, I'm still in love. And it was just something in the context where she just relaxed everything in my whole being. And I just went, yes? I was kind of hoping that was me, but it wasn't. And she said, yes, a year ago, I was in my village where all of us and my fiancé were marching to stand up to the regime that had taken up the gun to come out and to confront the nonviolent activist. And we bowed down in front of them and we began to chant. You could hear them today. You are our brothers. You are us. All we want is freedom. All we want is democracy. Come to our side. And she said they had orders to shoot and they shot. People were killed. 10 days later, she was separated from her fiancé. She looked at me in the eye. I've never seen him again. I'm still in love. Not just with him, I fear not even talking to his family for the persecution that might come. But I'm in love with freedom. I'm in love with freedom. I don't know how much you appreciate, and we could all do this together. Look around. Look at the affluence that we have. It's so cliched to say it, take it for granted, but we're at the precipice, and I dare say truth is more important than cowering to fear. We're at a precipice today on a global level where totalitarianism isn't about a nation dominating another one alone. We're all participants in the fossil fuel industry. It's clearly shown that we have inexorably heated our atmosphere based on our blind consumption, which is not our fault. Who could blame us for understanding the use of this natural organic substance called gas? But nonetheless, we've soiled our nest, and it looks somewhat irreversible. And even the children worldwide are basically saying to adults, why should I go to school and study the science of people who deny the very science that's killing us? What's the logic of that, Mom? My daughter says that. She's 12. Am I going to teach her meditation, to chill her out, to go back to school and study? She's talking about in-breath, out-breath on a planetary level. Dad, will there be oxygen in 2 years? We're the last in many ways to catch up with these realities. And I'll close with this. She looked at me in the eyes Matat Luen, and said, even if I were to die, if my little life helped create an awakening, a duende, a spiritualized duende, a bone-chilling creative moment that sent a shrill up the minds and hearts of good people to like, wow, I have the power. I can do anything I want with my eyes, my ears, my hands, my life. I can break any narrative that I want, to be the human being that I want to be a rebellion, to be a revolutionary, to live in values, to live in principles, one person at a time. And so when people ask, what is your meditation today? I am all over the eroticization, the romanticization, the emotionality. Become an emotional creature, like Eve Ensler talks about. I'm an emotional male. I lived for decades. In breath, out breath. Where did Alan go? He is so fucking calm. It has taken decades to overcome my calm. I'm so pathologically non-attached. It's like, what is your name? Oh, really? In breath, out breath. What comes in after the out breath? You got it. Another in breath. Make a career of it. Out breath, in breath. Do it for an hour. In our monastery, day 1, 20 hours a day. Day 2, 20 hours a day. 4 hours sleep, no masturbation, 2 meals a day, no food after 11. What do? In breath, out breath, in breath. Think, in breath, out breath. Repressing your sexuality is in between every breath. Don't do it. Come back to the given reality of the life that we're living. How well do you show up is the message of this talk. How well are you willing to be in incredible presence? And take the watch off the moment. Take the predictable sentence out of the paragraph. Ask the unthinkable, most intimate question you could imagine asking. It could be the deliverance of a higher frequency of love and honesty that we've never known. Or we could go into the predictable pattern of yet another sleep, to wake up in the day, to go through the machinations of another life of making money, to accumulate, to live in depression. I won't even ask how many of these good, beautiful minds have used antidepressants to keep your pain at bay. I was one of the first recreational users of antidepressants. You think it's funny? You live in a monastery for the better part of decades, you cannot live in lay society. There is no sense of integration. I went back to America and everyone was connected to speed. Everything was on a meter, the rent, the car, the electricity, consciousness, intimacy was always on this technological hum. 10,000 times faster today than then. I don't know what you're doing today to decathex from this neurotic momentum into tomorrow, but if you're asking about meditation from my humble point of view, is how well did you really, really live today, and how well did you show up for the most important people in your life? Now, Noel and Ken were the first 2 people I've met on this island. All roads lead back to these 2 people. And I have to say, I've fallen in love with both of them. They have this most remarkable marriage. I think it's a marriage. At least I want them to be married. And so generous with their time. And you know, the first thing I saw with them is that they showed up. I said, okay, this is brethren. They weren't doing anything other than wanting to know, who are you? What have you done? What do you think? How do you feel about that? They wanted to know me. They put me in front of them. And I find that to be the most gracious, generous, caring expression of meditation in action, based upon the most respected figures in my life. They would be encouraged to come to the front lines of revolution, holding arm in arm, confronting those weapons. 15 years went by and I never saw Da Yin Yin again. I have to admit, I'm that type. I fall in love very easily. After that 4.5-minute encounter, we never saw each other again. But I came back to the jungles. I came back to Bangkok. Where is she? Where is she? No one said, I don't know where she is. 16 years after that encounter around that fire, I'll end with this, I'm doing a little bit of my early day theatrical shtick in Brisbane. At the end of that particular event, a gentleman comes up and says, Mamidala Kimya, do you remember me? I says, Mamami Babu, I don't remember you. He says, oh yes, you might if I told you. I was there that night with Matet Luin when you sort of fell in love and she sort of fell in love with you, and you asked her, have you been in love? And she said yes, and she sort of fell in love with you, and you both went into denial about it, and all those years have passed now. 16 years you haven't seen her, have you? I just talked to her today. And I went, holy, I met my soulmate. She's come back. And I have to tell you, she's in Sydney and she's dying. She's with her husband, has 2 children. She was just taken out of hospice and she wanted to die at home. Gave me the address. I cut back on everything I had to do in Byron Bay, in Brisbane, flew to Sydney, went way out to the suburbs, knocked on her door. 2 children opened it up. A man opened it up. We spoke in Burmese, and they ushered me in. And there was Ma Tet Tet Luen in a hospital bed, bald-headed, still gorgeous as ever. And we both looked at each other after 16 years. You know how it goes with some people? And it's not her. It's each of us. My mother at 96 looks at me in the eyes and says, Alan, why did you practice being in the moment for 40 fucking years? Isn't it way too short? I said, sort of is when you look at it that way. You don't say have a good moment in life, Alan. You say have a good day. Why don't you open up space a little bit and open your heart more to people rather than being so present right here in this moment now? She said, even assassins can be in the moment. Damn, Mom, you're giving me a higher teaching here before you pass on. Where was your intelligence? You could have been the president. Rather, you went into breath watching. I don't take anything from that. I can go on and on and on. And I love silent intensive meditation. It's better than an entheogen. It's better than ayahuasca. It's better than intimacy in some cases, not often. And it works, except as soon as you stop that heightened sense of transcendence, you're right back down into the struggle of your own repressed shadow in psychology. It is meant to bypass those things. There's no integration. Well, she said, I came to Australia based upon a terminal case of cancer where they granted me citizenship because I was dying, and they gave me hospitalization. The gentleman here is not my husband, but he is the father of my children. I was imprisoned shortly after we met in Thailand, and they let me out when I was terminal. And she said, Alan, I'm going to die in love. Now, we have heroes and heroines in this world. Each of us have our families, our tribe, our friends, those people we go to for inspiration. Yes, we could laugh, we could break bread, we can drink wine, we can make love, we can be humorous, we could be light. But today the call is all of that and a depth of heart. It's a call to return for me to the most treasured, sacred, timeless quality of love. When I talk to myself about meditation, it's to stop and not to be a meditator being in the moment. It's to feel what the breath means. 5 years went by, I asked my teacher, sir, I have an insight. He says, what might it be, American monk? I've been watching the breath come and go for 5 years. Does it mean that I'm breathing? And we might laugh. But if we just kind of hung out for the next hour and just breathed, the vulnerability of breathing, and every one of us know without a doubt, the 252,000 people that died today did not really have advance notice that the next breath wouldn't come. We are an existential, photonic-driven phantasm beyond any hallucination that any entheogen has ever provided. We are clueless of who we are. We're on a thin little globe spinning through eternity around a sunball, guaranteed to annihilate 1 million to 4 billion years from now. And many scientists, even who deny extinction, very much are fundamentally in the belief that probably within 200 or 300 years, Earth will be hotter than Venus. We're in hospice. I'm sorry to say it. It will regenerate, we think. We're an existential phenomena that has this remarkable capacity for cognitive luminosity. We can work with this phenomena of mind. As far as I know, we're one of the only species on the planet that really seems to have this capacity to restrain from destructive states of consciousness. Are we employing that intelligence to overcome our self-centeredness, to re-inspire our dedication to otherness? That's my only message tonight. So wherever I go, in Bali, could there be a better place than this land? It is mind-blowing that these people have so much innate Ubuntu in them. Fair enough? You live here, I don't. I am constantly called upon to be a beautiful mind. And I'm just going with it. I don't care how corrupt they are. I don't care what they want to bribe me to be able to perform at Paradisia. I don't care. I'm going to go with the energy. It's a love fest of mutuality, but it's not just a resonant energy. How well are we learning from one another? It's not just loving one another, but learning. I want to get to know you. I want to break bread with you. I want to walk with you. I want to talk with you. I want to grow with you. I want you to accept my generosity, to be present with you. Thank you for the invitation to be in your community, Ubuntu. So I'll close with that. My friend, my non-lover, my existential wife, all of you, men and women, children, birds, butterflies, all the forms of life that we cohabitate with, the 200 a day that are going extinct, the millions of others that probably will as well. Who knows where we are? But we are in this field together. May I invite you, as my friend who passed away 2 days later, go into where you find the sacred, whatever it means to you. I watched my breath for the better part of 15 years. In breath, out breath. I'm alive. Another 10 years went by. I went to my teacher. I said, "Sir, I have another insight. What might it be?" Now that I realize that I'm alive, isn't the goal of meditation to do something precious with what a full breath affords you to do? It's not watching your breath. It's understanding the vulnerability of life. And what will you do to crack the coma, crack the narrative, crack the servitude, to structures that self-denigrate, to keep us in worry and fear and shame? Or will we release that and use our hands? My mom's hands were like this. They were so gnarled with arthritis. She couldn't walk. Alan, you still have hands. Not what you do with them for yourself today. Stop writing books. Who will you touch? Don't just say you love someone. Tell them what you love about them. Use your creativity. Use your mind. Go out in the sun and look up at the light and take that as a metaphor for delivering on the promise of what I heard you do with Aung San Suu Kyi. One person at a time, having the courage to care about others more than your own self-interest. And she concluded by saying, if we do this, one person at a time, our revolution will be successful. And whether it's in my lifetime or not, Alan, if you want to be involved in our country's struggle, please encourage people to take it beyond the parameters of Myanmar and pass along that very sacred, reverential psychology of wherever you go, duendify the space in this creative, bone-chilling creative moment of Ubuntu, eroticize it, spiritualize it, create an aesthetic, a poetry, a philosophy that's never been done before. And in that, we keep alive, to me, the greatest hope, which isn't to prevent the mortality of life. No one promised us that would not end, but we keep alive what I feel to be the highest values on this precious planet that we know, the quality of love, of compassion, and empathy. We cannot do what we do without each other. Fair enough? As isolated as we think we are, no matter what we have in the bank, the blessed people of this island, the cooks, those who secure this land, those who build this land, those who maintain this land, your mother and your father, your sister, your brother, your children, all of us are so deeply connected to this earth, the plants, the flowers. It's an issue of reverence. That's all I can say with you. And it's a very ephemeral state of mind that I'm speaking of, but each of us know it. So with that said, may I turn it over to you. May we talk openly about questions that you might have, about things that I've said or excluded or alluded to, anything personal. Take your time. I'm here to meet with you in an open-hearted way. And thank you for listening to me, and may I have the joy of listening to you. If you have questions, please. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Carolyn. Do you have anything you'd like to ask or bring up, or please, take your time. Yes.
Thank you so much for... Thank you so much for bringing the insight of the breath as meditation and being present. And with that, thanks. I actually would think that you're the right person to ask this, because I went to Burma in 1987 and was so taken by the country that I actually wrote an article about it in the magazine.
Wow.
Beautiful. And the smell of lapad dog always stays with me.
That's right, yeah.
It's fermented green tea leaves. So, and then the second time I went, it wasn't just to travel in, but I went as an emissary for environmental work in a conference. I think it was 205, and it was very disturbing because there was so many hotels being built, and I think it was Sofitel that was surrounding the Shwedagon.
Mm-hmm.
And the Shwedagon was going to be overshadowed by this hotel. Is it still? But the sun was no longer going to be hitting the Shwedagon, and therefore bringing in the spiritual energy there. So I haven't been back since. That's one question. And also we met with many. Oh, I need to go up.
Here you sit.
So also we met with many of the generals. I was doing Songkran with the generals.
Oh wow,
I know.
You're a celeb.
We were there with everybody, and so I had this strange feelings also with these generals picking up, and being an empath. So I was now curious because we took photos with them, and then with General Nawin's wife. I'm now curious, what was the underlying currents of that time when we were there with Nawin and all that? So I'm just curious, what were the politics and behind the subcurrents? If you could illuminate.
Yeah, it begs the question, like, who are you to co-associate with a dictator's wife?
We'll get to know each other.
I'll try to keep it short and keep it around to people.
Okay,
I'll tell you.
Talk later. We can speak later.
No. This is my life about this. I gather she's inquiring, having been in Burma in 1987, written something, had met some very important people, generals, and that means those who oppressed people as a way of being, and met with the dictator's wife who imprisoned my friend. So in a way, she's my enemy. She was photo-opping with the person who put my enemy, my best friend, in jail. How interesting with me. Namaste. Ubuntu with everyone except you. Anti-Ubuntu. You know, I just came from Burma a few months back and met with Aung San Suu Kyi's friends and other people in government. And they're sitting next to each other who are archetypal enemies. People who imprisoned and raped. They're in parliament together. And they refuse to participate in the politics of denigration. They use humor and satire, but they also use radical sincerity. And it's the ones who are the oppressed who have the higher ground. And that's the beauty of Burma, is that despite the machinations of oppression, and there's millions of people who are bludgeoned to death, who are bleeding in trauma today, the country is soaked in psychological trauma. But within that, there is an elevation, a status, a heightened state of awareness that refuses to participate in the collusion with these toxic, misogynist patterns of mind, manifested primarily through men, rich men, and their families, and equally their wives. Burma is a matriarchal culture. They say that many of the dictators and generals are ruled by their wives. It's not men doing it to the people. So I have written a book about this. I'll be happy to give you a free copy. And you can read for yourself a very detailed answer to your question about what the country is like. And I can't say it originates. When Aung San Suu Kyi came to San Francisco in 2010, the first time she'd been in America in 30 years, she was awarded the Václav Havel Award for Creative Dissent. I was invited to a dinner. At that dinner of 500 people, there was one book that was given to all the people there, and it was called Psychopolitics. And it was done by a French psychiatrist on the study of family systems and how they apply to nations and regions to understand the psychopolitical violence and the challenge to those structures. Burma is so complicated, by way of saying, that it's not a political issue, it's a psychological, psychiatric issue. If you will look at family systems, Burma was dominated for 150 years by the white colonist oppressive machinery out of England. They created a slave state without getting too into history. And even in the Rohingya area in Rakhine State, which is now such an international hotspot, the Rohingya came into Burma from Bangladesh at the behest of the British, who used them as slave labor to build their bridges and dams. So when we look at family systems, where do you draw the line? Well, the problem isn't in Burma, it's those who created the violence. And primarily it's Britain. And generally wherever Britain went in the world, they did so at the expense of indigenous people. That's why America fought them. But in Canada, genocide. Australia, genocide. So it's a very oppressive thing there. And so many of the struggles in Burma, and I was encouraged as a young activist, if you're going to get involved, do not vilify them. Think of that as a spiritual training. I refuse to demonize even those who harm me. I'll point out your weakness, but I will not write you off. Because they tell you, without redemption, what's your spiritual life like? And look at how casually we throw around insults to people. I mean, it's just as a matter of course that we do that. By way of saying that in Burma, it's a heart-wrenching culture. And in it, there's incredible heroism of values. Aung San Suu Kyi is just one, and she just says it all the time. I lived in my own house where I grew up. It's hundreds of thousands of people living under plastic. The prisons are filled, with people who were willing to risk everything. So Very curious to hear more about why you got a photo op with the general's wife. But later, we'll deal with that.
We were
Other,
actually fighting against them. We were there for environmental issues, and they were just decimating the beauty of the temples.
Burma's pretty ruined right now, like most of the world. But that's a whole other topic. Whole other topic. Questions about meditation, psychotherapy, entheogenic drug use, sex. We can talk privately, if I can.
No, I have a question about Burma.
Let's do it privately, because we have a chance to talk privately. We talk, because I see you quite frequently privately.
Yeah, okay.
Others who I will not see again, possibly. Anything at all.
Yeah, when was the last time you used a substance to achieve a certain state of consciousness, rather than your own DMT from your pineal gland?
You mean like an illegal substance?
Exogenous, yeah, exogenous substance rather than endogenous substance.
Are you wanting to know what it was or when it was?
When was the last time?
When and what happened?
Yeah.
Like, how did it affect me?
Yeah.
I'm very open about this. I've been a long time thought experimenter with entheogens. I'm not a public activist with them. I never recommend people to use them, and never have. Except some people. But I've explored quite a bit through the DMT filter. Ayahuasca is one of the least interesting substances for me. DMT, the active ingredient, is much more compelling. Special low dose. Someone said to me on the way in here about mushrooms. Who was that?
Don't know.
Oh, it was, where'd he go?
So are you talking
The-
5-MeO DMT or NDMT?
The first.
5-MeO.
Even in 83 to 87 when I was here, I often, for 4 months straight, I did low dose mushrooms every day.
So you're microdosing
Mushrooms
way back
in the
then
80s, yeah.
to shift your consciousness.
I was a academic experientialist. I treasured my isolation. I wrote, and I found that mushrooms activated another 15% of luminosity.
Yeah, and now they're talking about that, and I've been
Right.
to 4 psychedelic science conferences in the last 2 years, and they're all over that now, finally.
But I will say, to answer your question, I ceased doing that about 10 years ago, and I'll tell you why. It felt inauthentic to the vulnerability of being intimate with others. I was tired of me being me, looking at me. And we did 3 and 4 person experiments with deep intersubjective filming and audio taping, to experiments of consciousness. But even that was just so Nassau Research Allen's need. What I wanted to do was be in dimension, in messiness, in organic presence. I wanted to be in love. I wanted to be sexual. I wanted to be sweaty. I wanted to be eroticized. I wanted to be alive. I wanted to know myself in terrain that I didn't know through the artifice of a training, a substance, or an idea. I wanted to be raw, real, and naked. And so even people ask about my theater piece Saturday night here at Paradiso. It's completely improvisational, and it's born from the Burmese tradition of theater, which they combine, they call it the Adnyet. And it's born from storytelling, acting, a little bit of singing, comedy, improvisational presence, and primarily it's driven by, I don't know how many of you knew that George Orwell lived in Burma. You must have known that, right? He wrote the book Burma Days. He was British. He was a policeman in a suburb of Rangoon, get this, where the most notorious prison in all of Asia, built by the British, called Insane Prison, not because it's insane, but it's Insane Province. Orwell was a policeman in this small locale where the book Burma Days was conceived, and they say the seeds of 1984 were born from his time there.
Wow.
I say this because the spoken word tradition in time of dictatorship in Burma, which has been the last 70 years, is deeply rooted in Orwellianisms. confronting big sister, big brother, both inside and outside. So it's very hard to find comedy or satire or humor or and yet the spoken word poet in Burma who doesn't employ radical revolutionary energy to confront the apparatus of conformity to compliance with anything that denigrates. So it's a radical immersion in psychological ayahuasca. And so and yet there is a deeply psychotherapeutic experience. So I've taken after that tradition. So Saturday night, if you come to Paradiso, you get a free copy of a book, you get a workshop. Tickets are on sale either on my website, you can see where to do it, and or at the theater box office. It'll be interesting for sure. It's the thing that I really love to do the most, which is relating to people. But in that particular environment, with that particular topic, it's no holds barred. Really no holds barred.
What is your website, Alan?
AlanClements.com. On the homepage you can see how to get tickets. Or if you're on Instagram, you can follow or not. And there it says you can just direct message me and I'll tell you how to get them as well. Alan Clements World Dharma, and it's
Clements with a TS at the end?
TS at the end.
Okay, I got a question.
Mademoiselle, for you.
So you've talked a lot about meditation and what you came to after, and so what I want to ask is, how important is it for a person or people to do meditation in order to become a better person? Or is it quite possible that there are people in this world who are just absolutely as evolved as you get and they've never done meditation? How important is meditation, and does meditation actually really make people a better person? Because a lot of people who meditate, they still go around doing some terrible things.
Thank you, Noelle. To answer the question is, and I don't want to abscond from a very clear answer, I would say no. In fact, I would recommend don't even bother. Rather, take the message of how you relate to your lover, your husband, your wife, your children, your plants, your food, your body. You wake up in the day, you wash your face, deep self-care, fair enough? I mean, I give a shit what I look like. I don't like what I look like, but I care about it. And you look in the mirror and you do everything you possibly can to enhance your look and come to some acceptance of it, fair enough? Is that a meditative act or is that vanity? Make it a meditative act. What does it mean to make it meditative? I want to be so real here, to go beyond the shaming, worry, doubt, expectation, denigration, Botoxing, filling, I'm going to get more of it, to find myself living in conformity to an image that isn't me. Is that meditation? Absolutely. How honest are you is meditation. That's it. Is it sitting with your eyes closed? No. People who sit with their eyes closed over many days and weeks, it takes a certain diligence, but is no guarantee that you'll be less neurotic. For sure. I have studied this shit. I'll debate it with anyone. And I've seen the best, and those who claim enlightenment and insight from it are the biggest frauds. Sorry, it didn't work that way. It's called the denial of your humility. No one's enlightened. It's propaganda. Meditation could even be seen within some of these systems as a huge existential Ponzi scheme. 10-day retreats were a commercialization of the very concepts I'm talking to you about, because I studied at the epicenter of it. It's not sitting with your eyes closed. It's how well do you occupy dimensions of consciousness, primarily integrity, honesty, transparency, and empathy is the mark of a, I would call, a true spiritual seeker. Not how well you can sit, not how long you can sit. We had so many Americans and Germans, no offense to either one of them, that could sit sometimes for 5, 6, 10 hours without moving, still fucking neurotic. Not for a week, 2 years. What does that say about you thinking that you're going to do a 5-day retreat? No hope for you. What it means is, okay, where I am, I'm going to show up with everything I've got. What does that mean? Be mindfully intelligent. Feel, look, discern, think, ask. Overcome denied areas of fear, anger, and delusion. And I'll close with this question with Noel's. As an artist, and I think many of you are artists, and if not, we could easily appreciate art or music or lovemaking or dance or anything that requires some intelligence to learn to do it well, although even someone in finger painting could do it well. But if we develop an excellence with it, we want to understand what are the colors on your palette. I've used this analogy many times. A meditator is encouraged to study their states of consciousness so that you become more adept or fluent in, oh, that's white. How many of us know that that is the state of gratitude? And can, as an artist, put her brush in gratitude paint and lift it out of that paint and mix that white with the color of red, which is action paint, energy. Energy and gratitude, and the color of blue, which is focused attentiveness to that which is present. 3 states of mind, so that I say, thank you, Carolyn, for creating this wonderful circumstance for me to meet people. Expressing the artistry of gratitude. Very few meditators know the color of a state of mind. So if you're looking for a way to understand meditation, study energies of consciousness, especially the ones that beautify shared space and that see that states of consciousness, to make them real, require action. None of us would be satisfied if the cooks and Carolyn and other community members promised us there would be a great meal here, but when we got here, there was no food. Because, oh, I thought that the idea that you would eat was sufficient to the food. No way, right? The idea of generosity for many people, they keep harbored in their mind as a kind of weird pathological insurance policy of maybe sometime in the future I'll act on it. For the meditator, though, to be successful, they care enough to express it in a non-postponed way. And what is the color of non-postponement? I'll close with this. They have a color in Buddhist psychology and meditation circles called Sanvega. It's a little like the Spanish term duende, but it has a deep sense of urgency associated with it. I cannot live without making contact with you from the most beautiful state of mind. I don't care if it's appropriate or not. I want to know you. I want to ask you a question. May I ask you a question? I promise it to be respectful because I understand the color of respect. And I will listen to you because I know the color of listening. You get the point? What are the colors of consciousness and how well do you know how to mix them? And do you have the courage to apply them? And then can you co-create shared colors on the canvas of open space to do things that have never been done before, rather than just to sell your wares? That's called world music. A world Dharma that exceeds the individual, and you do something that's never been done before. Call it Tantra. Call it the elevation of love, keeping alive the innocence as we grow old, taking the death out of the paradigm of aging. So, thank you. Other questions you might have, please take your time. We'll end in a minute. Yes.
I think all of us can relate to internal quiet space, and oftentimes there is an encounter of some dimension that is beyond ourself, right? There is the encounter of the intimacy with that which is greater than ourselves. Have you, in your quiet time of that extended time of silence, engaged in a lovemaking of sorts with the source or divine, or would you ever put those words, I'm saying that like that? But then, what I love about what you say, it's like take that into action and take that into the encounter, because it's like God looking back at itself. But the question is, meditation is just mindfulness, is just quieting the mind, but there is a experience that, with DMT for sure, opens up to dimensions, and I'm a non-user of any substance, but goes to dimensions that encounter something that then encounters itself and becomes love in action. The encounter of the divine in meditation. About that.
The encounter of the divine within the meditational state or within transcendental awareness?
You know, what is your name?
Ilona.
Silona.
Ilona.
Silona, what a nice name. Interesting. You know, I have to say, I'll be very honest with you, which you would want nothing else, right? I would want nothing else. Is I was listening to you through what I thought my teacher would say to you. And he...
I was hoping you were going to give me an answer.
Well, Alan, are you talking or is it your teacher? Let me see, let me check in with him. Alan's talking about an experience with his teacher. Yeah, it's Alan talking. What do you mean by the divine?
That would be an open-ended question, because I think a lot of people can relate to that sensation, but whatever it means to you, if you ever did or did something of that sort come to you or was part of your experience.
Divine. I probably use the word, I guess how do I use the word divine? Or how does it interrelate with my meditative experience? Divine never really played into my meditative training. What played into it was how well do you understand your mind? It was to know your mind is the most important task of your life. We heard that over and over and over again. To know your mind is to look and feel into the nature of your own mind. How intelligent are you in the field of consciousness, interrelating to the conditions that you call your mind? How able are you to define the patterns, the energies, the interrelated principles of consciousness? How able are you to understand the ecosystem of the inner as it plays through your senses into the outer? So it's the study of perception. Where this consciousness comes from is open to speculation. Many people clearly have radical so-called mystical experiences. I was in a monastery where the study of that was what you did. And repeatedly, it was grounded in the deep literacy, the study of the literacy of mindfulness in context to consciousness. Mindfulness was your eyes and your ears, and discernment was the intelligence to study what it is that's arising. Why is it arising? What is the nature of it as it arises? Does it disappear? Does it sustain? Does it elevate? Who's observing it? So it was the study of the intelligence of consciousness. So people were de-enthralling themselves incessantly from, oh my God, that stuff. Anything that was epiphanictic was like, sort of in the rule of thumb, was like, oh, she's just going off on something, and just let her come back to earth. And the rule was, everything that you experience is conditioned and changing, and not reflective of a permanent observer of the phenomena. Like when you look at a rainbow, there is no inherent rainbow, it's conditions. And so the same thing with consciousness, it's the rainbow effect, that there is no observer. Ultimately, there's observation without observer. There's suffering, but no one who suffers. There's the release from suffering, but there's no one who's free. There's just the experience of freedom and the awareness of that. But there's no permanent intersubjective or subjective entity that's the constant reference point of phenomena. And divinity is often referred to as some kind of heightened state of preferred awakening. And so they say in the monastery that it begs identification. It kind of gives the appearance that there's something special to achieve. What's special to achieve is the absence of fear. And that's a preferred state in a monastery, the absence of anger. And so they constantly encourage you, are you trustworthy enough that no matter what happens, you will not go off on me? So if you think divinity is something that helps you not to go off on someone, even though you're being slapped, or in Burma you're being raped and tortured, everywhere in the world, it happens all over the world, right?
And I just wanted to add your awesome statement that mindfulness is maybe not such a good thing. Do you know
I didn't say that.
Well, let me just add
You said that.
The mindfulness training they've done with pathologically negative people, when they practice mindfulness, it removes their emotional attachment to such a degree that they're even more capable of doing negative things because they're so detached. You know, it's like how detachment can be, like I think you were alluding to it, can be
No.
not a very useful thing. No?
No.
No.
Mindfulness is as good as the teacher who supports you in understanding it. One of the dirty little secrets of meditation, without a good teacher, it won't happen. Sorry. You'll be as neurotic as you are, if not worse. And I know, I've seen it. I've seen people who practice on their own. They don't go anywhere. And many cases of radical redemption with good mindfulness, with good teachers. But it's not just mindfulness. It's a whole range of states of consciousness. Unthinkable patience. Radical vulnerability. You've got to decathex from the locomotive of your agenda. I mean, just shave your head. You think you look bad with hair? Shave it. You think you're struggling in your own life as you are? Give up all your money and say, I'm going to study consciousness in the context of a meditation retreat without an end to it. Flip you out. You'll be counting the days faster than you got in. So, and there are people who are murderers and rapists who are redeemed through meditation. I've seen it. Absolutely. You know, back in the early day, pre-48, pre-1950, this was before my era, obviously, but meditation was not taught in retreats. You look at the first 25 years of the Buddhist canon, meditation wasn't go to a Vipassana retreat or a Tantra retreat or a workshop. That's bullshit. It was all done in the organic context of life. Meditation was something that you did as the application of presence in context. And so in Burma, my teacher was very well known for his ability to relate to people in their context. How do I transform my life in context? So there are many soldiers, many alcoholics, in Burma, a country of opiate users. I mean, look at all the narcotics that come out of Burma. And so there are many people who are consummate alcoholics who overcame their drunkenness through being attentive to the whole process. As you reach for your glass of whiskey, you lift it to your mouth, you taste it, you lower your glass, you treat it as a reverential action. That concept right there is very important to meditation.
So you're not just globally saying don't do meditation.
I'll send you a book. I've written about it.
I mean, you just said it earlier, so I was just asking.
He is saying don't meditate. He's saying be present in life instead of closing your eyes and not being present, right?
Yes to both and no to both. What I'm saying is that meditation is living. And there's also meditations that are sitting with your eyes closed. But the one with your eyes open in context is 23 hours a day or 20 hours a day. And generally speaking, the vast majority of your life. Why not do what you do and integrate wisdom and compassion and presence and awareness there, rather than hold yourself hostage to some idea that meditating with your eyes closed is going to do something. Why in the fuck would you waste your time with something like that? Why not be in love rather than only in the future with the partner I haven't met yet? Be the chemistry that you seek. Disavow yourself from the fantasy of the future. So a lot of meditators hold themselves hostage with what they think society is telling them they should do, but I wouldn't waste my time there. Rather than practice yoga off the mat, practice yoga off the mat and bring yoga off the mat to the yoga on the cushion. There's no such thing as yoga off the mat. It's a waste of time. They're selling yoga spaces. There's no meditation off the cushion. There's meditation off the cushion. It's called meditation in the world. And you bring that to your cushion. So it's the other way around. So there's meditation in the world. That's all I'm advocating. And it's not about stillness, and it's certainly not about happiness. If you go in with meditation with that agenda, you will be miserable. Miserable. You have to be willing to cry. You have to be willing to break down the artifice of pride. You have to collapse the ego structure of certainty. You have to face your own mortality. Happiness does not bypass those states of mind. You have to be humbled on the rocks of your own denied arrogance. I'm sorry to say it. And the best way to do that is to get into a relationship. And if you're in one, recommit to it. Get remarried.
Can you say that again? You have to be humbled on the rocks of your
Arrogance.
own denied arrogance. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I love it.
And that takes a courageous intimate to be that frank with you. You know, in Burmese monasteries where I studied, it was a privilege to have a teacher. It's not like it's, we're selling workshops, anyone comes for a couple of $100s for the weekend. There was thousands of people waiting in line to come to this monastery because it was offered freely. All the monasteries in Burma, there's no charge. It's all offered freely, which is amazing. And to be in a circumstance with a teacher, you follow the instructions, but if you don't want to follow them, just let the next person come. So deep, deep humility is the number one thing to enter I would call it a relationship of quality. I can't judge that because I'm single at the moment. But too much meditation. Way too much. Okay, we're going to close with anything else that you want to know from me, or? It was really nice to meet you. I hope to see you again. As I said, Saturday night I'm at Paradiso, 7:30. You can get tickets from my website. There's a workshop the following day downstairs at Paradiso on the application of much of what I say in the show. I'm also invited to be a speaker at a conference on April 3rd. I wish I enlightened leadership or something to do with sacred leadership.
Yeah, sacred leadership.
I don't know where it is,
It's
but
at
I'm.
Wu Wei. It's at Wu Wei. Who knows where that is? Wu Wei.
Wu Wei.
Yeah.
Wu Wei.
On the way to Gawagaja.
And I put out to all of you, if any of you have connections or that you have interest, I'm here to meet people. I'm here to relate and learn. I'm looking for a home. I'm looking for
Come
a
here,
community.
stay here.
And I'm looking to, if there's opportunities to speak, groups of 3 are fine. Please invite me. You can find me online and Facebook. I'm also coming back, I think, on April 18th, where I think I'm going to be leading a weekly World Dharma Forum where there's a 10-minute talk and an hour-long question and answers here in Ubud and also in Canggu, which has been hugely popular in Canada where I've been living. I'm hoping to do it at different facilities, but also I'm thinking Yoga Barn. I've been introduced to some of the owners there. And but stay in my life. I hope to see you again. And if you would like a complimentary copy of my book that I wrote for my daughter called A Future to Believe In, all you have to do is boldly write your email. And when you get the book, all you have to do is say, please delete my email from your database and you'll never hear from me again.
And Alan's email is on here, so you can reach him there. And here's, if you would like to thank him for the talk, there's a way to do it right there.
And
And
one last thing about and people often ask how I survive, and I'm not clear how I pull it off, because I'm kind of incapable of working post-monastic life. I've been very, very consumed with the plight of denigrated cultures. Very concerned about indigenous people. And by way of saying that, I have chosen in the last 5 years, primarily the last 3 years, to eliminate from my life middle people, publishers, agents, managers. And as a result of that, I've lost all of my income. And it wasn't a lot, but it was enough to travel without having to be vulnerable about, I cannot live without you. And so I've opened up a Patreon, a pledge circumstance on my website as well under the support. You can offer $1 a month. And in that, whether it's more, I give much more back, whether it's personal Skype sessions or other books or retreats. I'm a real stickler that whatever's given to me, I like to triple the financial back, which is through my services and my work and my friendship. So if you have interest to pledge, you can do that. Otherwise, thank you from my heart. It was offered freely. Don't feel compelled that you have to. And stay close, and I hope to see you Saturday night. It'll be fun. Namaste.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming, and thank you, Ken and Noel, for having us to dinner the other night and introducing us to Alan. And if I may, I'd really like to read from the Radiant Sutras, because there's one passage in there that speaks perfectly to Alan's talk tonight, and I'd like to close with that. So I'll get my favorite book just